Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for Thursday, October 6th, 2016, on what is shaping up to be, hands down, guys, the best virtual reality news day post-Rift Vive launch. Absolutely. There is no arguing that. Well, there might be, but I might not listen. So let's get on with it. Game-wise, let's start with a little title that Ready at Dawn, the Order 1886 devs were teasing at. And it is called Lone Echo. Man, does this game look good. And I know I've been nerding it up with a lot of these good-looking games, but it's the question we've been asking, me, you, the Triple A, the good-looking stuff. When is it coming? It's coming now. And it's coming every freaking month between now and next summer, and it's awesome. So yeah, Lone Echo, check out the links I have of the gameplay. The gameplay looks fantastic. I just can't wait to get my big clubby mitts all over this game. Like I said, the only negative for me, the exclusivity, but with that said, I do get it. I just wish some of this stuff, because, you know, for me it's easy, right? Rift, Vive, who cares? And yes, there's going to be workarounds, probably to allow you to play that. But with all of that said, it does suck for the people, maybe they're not as tech savvy, you know, that have one over the other and that don't get to enjoy that content. But what can you do, right? Other than buy the other units or find some workaround. So that is unfortunately life and reality. So yeah, that's Lone Echo. Next up, again, the next two games that I'm talking about were all ones that were teased that we now have some concrete information on. So that was Lone Echo. This is 4A Games project, and theirs is called Arktika.1. And just like Lone Echo, it's stunningly beautiful, the game. And I know if I throw a word out like stunningly sexy game, I'm not just talking in VR, I'm talking in general. Like, these are nice looking games. Granted, there's non-VR games that look better, but the fact that it's starting to, you know, these types of games are starting to appear is just, it gets me all excited. So Arktika.1, also touch-based game. They estimate second quarter of 2017. So again, depending on, you know, are they talking calendar quarters? Then we're looking at April, May, June. I'm okay with that because, you know, like I was saying, it's starting to be that every single month moving forward from now to next summer is going to be chock full of AAA titles. Can't wait. So that is Arktika.1, a post-apocalyptic shooter from 4A Games. And then from Epic Games, yep, because they have also been hinting at a title. Theirs is called Robo Recall. And I would say this is probably the best looking of the bunch, and they are all amazing, but this one, it's Unreal Engine, right? Don't even have to say more than that. But here's what I love about what the folks at Epic are doing, okay? Take a look at the game, and then tell yourself while you're watching it, this is going to be free, because it is. It's going to be free. They are releasing this as a free title because, you know, they want us as their beta testers. I'm sorry, but that is the reason they're doing this, but that's okay. That's not a bad thing. It's freaking fantastic that they're doing this because we are a rabid bunch of starved gamers in the VR side of things, right? We're looking for these types of games. Not all of us, but a lot of us are. And we'll be more than happy to put up with a few bugs here and there and write those up and help Epic fix the games, because 100,000 people, you know, can do a lot of good beta testing. So I got absolutely no problem with that. Their official reason, and I buy this as well, is that it will give them an opportunity to assess publicly the Unreal Engine VR tools that they've, you know, been releasing to developers. So fantastic. It's the Unreal Engine VR Editor is the official name. So fantastic. Expected date for that, first quarter 2017, so your January, February, March period. All right, news-wise, The biggest announcement was probably for the Oculus Touch, and we knew it was coming. We talked about it several episodes. We kind of guessed at the price, and we ended up being pretty bang on with that. Our communal guesses were all pretty much in that range, and that is 199 US, 189 pounds if you're in the UK, and 262 Canadian. Haven't had a chance, guys, for the Aussie, New Zealand, and the other ones, but I'll try to annotate and remember to annotate this when I find those out. Now, apparently, and I haven't verified this yet, guys, Amazon UK, and I should have a screenshot up here, is offering pre-orders for it now. They're not waiting. They're available. Now, what's also interesting is the official release date. So let's start with pre-orders. North America, the rest of the world, aside from UK apparently, they've said pre-orders start on the 10th of October, and the release date is going to be the 6th of December. With the UK ones, pre-orders start immediately, and apparently November 23rd is the release date. So that would be nice for a change, be on the other side of the pond and get it earlier for once. But again, I don't know how accurate that is. That was just fresh as of me, talking to you guys literally 20 minutes ago. So I'll have to verify that and certainly annotate if that's not the case. Now, Brendan Arib, there we go. When it was turned for his speech, some really, really good nuggets came out of that. And the biggest probably is him wanting to put the final nail in the, yes, we can do VR room scale coffin. Some caveats to that, though. And this is where, like I said, it gets really interesting. It's always been that the Rift was the more affordable unit, right? The Vive was the more expensive, but offered the full experience, seated plus room scale. And most people were okay with that. They understood that the Touch would be coming. What kind of got lost in this, and there were guesses that it was going to be this or that. The reality is, when you add up all the variables to get your most or your closest apples to apples comparison cost-wise between the Rift and the Vive, you are actually having the Vive as a better deal as things stand now. And I'm going to explain why. So if you got, let's just use Canada where I am as an example, right? So here it's $849 for the Rift. It's $1,149 for the Vive, okay? Here, the Touch set is going to be $262 Canadian. But they've already stated it's going to require 3 cameras for their room scale, and they're going to offer the details and include that full room scale functionality on Touch's release day. Okay, but back to that. So $262 Canadian and another $220 Canadian for 2 additional cameras. Okay, you now have a total of $1,331 versus the $1,149 Canadian. That's roughly $200 more expensive for the Rift now as a Canadian. That's going to fluctuate, obviously, from country to country, region to region, but it should approximately percentage-wise be roughly the same, meaning the Rift is going to come out slightly more expensive, right? And if you're looking at $200, we're talking about, at that 1,000 mark, roughly 20%. Now, for some countries, that's enough to cover the tax pretty much, right? The tax difference and then some, maybe enough to even buy you a game. So it's interesting how the perception of, value and cost changes and evolves, right? And then the other thing that they didn't mention, but it was kind of a thought of mine, was Touch is new. The Vive motion controllers, or the Vive controllers for tracking, have been around for about 6 months now. My guess would be that the fabrication process, right, the manufacturing for the controllers, the parts themselves have come down somewhat in cost. So if they want to be even more aggressive coming up towards the holiday season now, I got a feeling they can probably drop the bundle price $100, maybe 150, to take that into account, right? And it would be interesting then, and we'll revisit that obviously in December, how close the cost difference is at that point, right? 20%, has it widened even more, or, is Rift doing something as well to counter that, and they're kind of in the same ballpark again? Only time will tell. Now, we also, for the first time, have official minimum specs for the Rift. That's something we haven't had to date. We've had the recommended specs. I've talked about what I think the recommended should be, simply because my personal feeling is the high end, we don't even have that hardware yet, right? The recommended, to me, in my opinion, is basically the fastest cards on either side of the equation, which on NVIDIA, until the Titans are mainstream, is going to be the 1080 and the 1070. That would be my idea of a recommended, but it's fluid. It's going to change too. So yeah, let's talk about those minimum specs. So what they've done, and they say part of that has to do with improvements that they've made in the rendering, but we'll get into that after. So the minimum specs, instead of a 970, it's a 960. There was no mention on the AMD side, but we know that the recommended was an R9 290. So my best guess would be, AMD wise, we're talking maybe a 7970, which is actually the card that I had in that machine before I put the hand-me-down, the R9 290 in it. So that'll be interesting, but that's minimum specs, right? And again, they attribute that to rendering improvements. Now, on the processor side, you've got your minimum i3 6100, possibly the AMD FX 4350, down from the i5 4590 and FX 9000 respectively, right? So yeah, they've definitely lowered the the floor a little bit on the entry point. My issue would be that's pretty bare minimum, even with improvements. If they say, if those prove to be valid or actual improvements, I'm still a little hesitant to recommend that. To me, that's just, it's not going to provide the experience that I would consider, a favorable one. You're probably going to be able to play the less intense games, absolutely. And if that's all you want to do, that's fine. Like the party flavored type games, right? Your Wii Play or Wii Sports type titles. Yeah, you'd be okay with that. But anything more advanced, I think you're going to struggle with those minimum specs. And I would honestly urge you to save another month or two, if that's what's needed, to just get up one more tier. We also heard from Michael Abrash, and he had a really, really cool prediction. We've talked about that as well here. You guys have had lots of comments on what your predictions are. And Michael's, basically, he predicts 4K headsets, right, with perfect eye tracking and augmented VR by 2021. So we're talking basically 5 years, half a decade, which is exactly the figure that we used when we were kind of speculating. Now, for anyone who's not aware, just quick, super brief history on Michael Abrash. For a lot of game programmers or game programmer wannabes like I was, he was absolutely a guru, and still is, for a lot of 3D stuff. And some people might say he was overrated, overhyped. You get that same argument with Carmack. But the fact of the matter is, he released some awesome texts that to this day are still amazing. And first one was his technique, and not solely his. Others were involved in this as well, but Mode X. Now, back when VGA, was putting the final nails in the Atari ST and Amiga's coffin, because VGA just changed the game. The 256 colors changed everything, even though the sound was inferior on PCs at the time, right? And anyways, Abrash had a technique. So instead of standard VGA, 320 by 200 by 256 color, it was a mode that did 320 by 240, 256 colors, which basically made the pixels look more square than elongated with traditional VGA mode. And he's also had some books, and still on my bookshelf is his graphic programming black book. And if you call yourself a graphic programmer, but you've never heard of that book or know what it is, you're either very young or making it up. Because, and I say that tongue in cheek, right? Because it's known and it's such an important book, and it has been for so long. But he took to the stage, and yeah, that was his prediction. Along with that, he said 140-degree field of view is probably going to be standard at that point. And what he considers 4K and perfect in terms of eye tracking and everything else would be a device, he said, that if you could use it and do a driving test, you'd be able to pass wearing it. Now, to pull that off, you know you're going to need crazy, awesome, low latency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And apparently he believes that's what we're going to have in half a decade. And he threw some caveats in there. Obviously, eye tracking has to progress at the predicted pace to be able to make that target. But still, very cool. Check that out. And we also heard, because noticeably absent so far from Connect 3 was Palmer Luckey. And the reason, apparently, this is according to Jason Rubin, is that it was 100% lucky. He didn't want to be a distraction, so he opted not to attend. So whatever your opinion is on that, I just report that as news, and we'll move on. Now, Facebook has their own tool called Quill Art that they talked about today. And this tool looks really, really cool. Now, it's a little more traditional in terms of being like an illustration style tool. It doesn't have some of the fancy brushes that Tilt Brush has, but what it does have is pretty damn solid, and it looks good. Now, again, my use of that is just as an enthusiastic hobbyist. I'm not near the level a lot of you guys dealing with graphics are. So you could tell me if it looks like crap better than I could ever assess it. But what I saw on the screen and in the presentation looks like a pretty fun tool for somebody like me to do some doodling in and, you know, do some VR stuff for fun. The link will be in the description below. Have a look. Now, the other neat thing at the Connect 3 was the prototype called Santa Cruz, which is Oculus's, R&D effort at making inside-out tracking viable and a real thing. They didn't get into any of the specifics in terms of what the GPU is, etc., but the solution apparently to the author who was able to try it for about 10 minutes, right? He said it was absolutely amazing, and he would put it closer, the experience, to the Rift and Vive graphically than he would towards the Gear VR, and I would presume Daydream, right? So whatever they're doing GPU-wise, probably some pretty damn cool technology below the hood. So hopefully we'll get some more details on that, because I would personally love to know what's powering that. Now, Carmack, he was able to pull Carmack aside, the author, and ask him some questions about it. And Carmack made it known that he had left that team, I think it was like a year before, hadn't been involved. But his understanding is what the author was experiencing was in the neighborhood of 60 frames per second. So that is down, from the target 90. So still looked fluid to him, though. And that's what I find in that range. I am pretty sensitive to frame rates, but I find if I'm higher than 60, kind of in that range, I'm okay. If it's 65, 70, I can still see the fluidity, right? Next up, just some general other Connect 3 updates. I thought I would kind of lump these together because they're just little news tidbits, and it's not worth, getting into great detail on them individually. So one of the announcements from Mark Zuckerberg was $250 million investment in funding Oculus Rift virtual reality. So that's pretty damn good. Some nice seed money there, $250 million bucks. Oculus also mentioned, and this is a cool move. So as much as I harp on them for the exclusivity, something like this, at least it shows some goodwill towards the developers. And that is namely that, look, if you have up to 5 million in revenue only, right? So you're an indie company or whatever, we will cover the bill for the Unity engine licensing. So I thought that was pretty cool. And that's, again, any devs up to 5 million in revenue. So obviously you'd have to share some financial information with them, etc. But if you are, a couple of buddies or a small indie group working on a title, that might be attractive, having the Unity engine licensing covered. And a further 10 million they dedicated to diversity-based projects. That's all they said, diversity-based. Haven't been able to find out any more on that, but I will take a look and update here if there's other news on that. And then finally, we had some announcements on the Facebook VR app, and it actually turns out it's apps, plural. There's two. First one is called Parties. It's text-based mostly, some visual, allows you to chat with your friends. Rooms is kind of more of a social hangout, up to 8 people, and it allows you to view videos or listen to music with them. Now, the screenshot that I'm throwing up shows you the typical avatar head, the avatar representation of yourself. I think it's going to be cool when it gets to the point where it can really take the real you, right? Obviously, a lot of technologies are going to have to improve to make that happen, but having some kind of webcam that you could throw up that could capture you at the required frame rate, stream it, incorporate it into VR, it gets to that level, this becomes a real viable way of hanging out with buddies, even if you're in different corners of the world. All right, guys, that's it for the news, action-packed today. I can't wait to get back to doing some playing. I will have some time today that I haven't had all week. Can't wait. As always, guys, cheers, and definitely catch you on the VR flip side.